Hello folks, and welcome to part 2 of the building of Tony Ray's DH82 Tiger Moth. In the last video I went along at a cracking pace, mainly because it basically just slots together and there's no fettling required to get it to fit. In my haste, confession time, I did drop a clanger, and it's a one to avoid if you can at all. And that is, I failed to put in these T-piece bolts, nuts rather, which should have been pressed in before the two sides had any formers added. I kept looking at the little gap in the F3 former and wondering why it was there. And of course, logic said if you looked at the photographs, Mark, you could see what it was there for. So I had to press them in after the event, which wasn't easy. But what I did was I used an engineer's clamp, and I was able to put a piece of plywood at this side so I didn't crush the balsa, and I was able to press them in. But that's one to avoid. The other thing that I did is exactly the same as Cliff Harvey did, and that's I got the sides the wrong way around. Left side and right side. Now, it only matters in the sense that the slot that comes out to the control surfaces, the rudder or the elevator, will be opposite to what you see in the photographs. It doesn't matter to me at all because I'm actually not going to use that method to control the elevator and the rudder. I'm going to use a pull-pull cable system, which is more in keeping with the prototype. I'm not going to use the technique that's shown on the plans, which is basically a wire and tube. But that's just a personal choice. The wire and tube is a much quicker option and it's very effective. I'll show you what you would do, but I'm going to do something a little bit different. The other issue that I had, and what stopped play, so to speak, was these parts here hold a couple of miniature T-nuts, which are tiny little things. There are only M2s, and they fit into here, and they support the cabin that'll be built above it. Now, I've only got two. I should have four. I tried Amazon to get some, no luck. And when I did find some on the internet, they weren't going to come for another 2 or 3 weeks. Well, I'm not going to wait that long. So I had a scrat around, and I've managed in my little stash to find some M2 Allen key headed bolts, which are actually, I think, superior to what's in the kit. And I'm going to actually bolt the cabin on using them. And I've also got corresponding nuts. So I'm going to make a little keeper on the back of this piece that'll hold the nut in place, and that's how I'm going to actually do it. So I'll show you that when I get to that stage, but there's nothing to stop me now. I've cut out all the remaining formers, as you can see here. This one's a strange one. This is F5. It has a dashed line across it, and it's partly lasered through, and that's because you actually cut this out and remove it after it's been installed. It's only there to hold the shape of the turtle decking, which goes on over here, because you're going to have an access hatch for the luggage bay. So I'm going to cut through that a little bit more so it'll be easily break off, and the stringers won't be glued to this. It'll be removed after the event. It's only there to support the shape. And one other thing that I've noticed in the intervening time, I described this thing as a jigsaw puzzle, but it's a jigsaw puzzle I've discovered with an extra piece. And that's this piece here, F2A. There's no reference to it on the lookup form, the itinerary form, the parts list. And there's no reference to it in the photographs of it being glued in. But if you jump ahead a few photographs, you can just see it on one of the shots. And if you look closely, can you guess what it is? Well, it's the servo tray. It takes two 25-gram servos, I believe, is the size, and it fits in here. And even if I don't actually use it, but I may have the servos located slightly differently, but even if I didn't use it, I think it's a good structural piece to add. So I'm going to glue that in the appropriate place. So let's get everything jigged up so you can see it, and let's get started. We'll put this mystery piece out first, and we'll add this. And these little pieces you can see here are the guide bars for the wire and tube method of controlling the surfaces. I'll show you how they would be located, but as I say, it's not for me. I want to actually use a scale-ish pull system. So it goes in here, dry fit. Will it dry fit? Well, I can't complain with that, that's spot on. So good dry fit. I'll take it out. Somebody asked me what glues I use. Well, they actually said, one, how much time do you spend picking glue off your fingers? Because they've seen how I work. That's part of the fun, isn't it? And two, what glues do I use? And when I'm doing these sort of videos, it's dangerous, but you get into all kinds of assumptions that just people know what to do next. And not all of the time they do, and they feel very unsure on what to use and is it okay and so on. So that's the main adhesive that I'm using at the moment. It's a 2-in-1 water resistant PVA based adhesive. I like to use the water resistant ones. I got into the habit of doing that when I was building model boats for obvious reasons. And it's very good. It's a strong bond. For any CA work I use, this is the particular make that I'm using at the moment, but it's basically a medium to thin consistently CA. It's not an expensive off the shelf. This is specially for models because that's nonsense anyway. It's an industrial commercial CA glue, so it's not expensive. And as you've seen, I use those adapters. They make a huge difference to applying CA glue. And I occasionally use a heavy grade CA with a kicker to for those stubborn things that need to be joined. So in this case, it's such a nice tight fit. I could use the CA if I wanted, but I'm going to use the PVA based glue. We'll get this glued in. And I like applying it with a brush. I think you've got a bit more control over what you're doing with it. And I've found with these laser cut parts, my experience so far with laser cut kits was what you saw in the last video. But my experience is that when you add the glue, the dry fit is actually easier. Some sort of lubrication, I suppose, with the adhesive. So there you go. That's a nice, if I never even used the tray, that's a nice structural addition there. I like that. Right, next thing, I'm going to cut through this a little bit more just so it's easier to remove later on. And we'll start putting the parts in. I'll show you the sequence I'm going to do it, because what I don't want to do is get to the point where I'm forcing these in because they're too tight. So I'm going to put the rear spacer in and then work forward, but more of that in a second. Let's get this done first. I don't want to break right through it, but I do want to make it easier to remove later on. That's it, not too much. Okay, right. This is what I'm going to do. F10 is the upper rear spacer, and you can see there are two slots to take the thin. I really like that feature. It'll add it enormously to the strength of the thin and lock it into the fuselage. Too often I see this is omitted from designs, so that when the fin's glued on, it's literally just the glue holding it in position. And there's a lot of force imparted on the fin with the rudder movement and the effect of the air pushing against that rudder. So I like that feature. Let's get that glued in first. I'll move this along so you can see clearly what I'm doing. It's a lousy day in the northeast. The rain's pelting down. Looks like summer's been and gone. If that was it, I think we've had it. So let's apply some glue here. It's a proper modelling day. I know it fits because I've already tried it. Let's add the glue along the edge. You just got to be careful you're putting glue where it needs to be rather than where you think it is. I found some wonderful videos on YouTube about full-size tiger moths. Extremely popular aircraft. I think it says something like 8,000 were made by de Havilland. The old saying, easy to fly, difficult to fly well, apparently was very true of the tiger moth, or is very true of the tiger moth. But it's a really interesting model. I still haven't decided on a scheme for it. Just going to try and, but there's so much out there. I don't want to just make one up. I would like to make, or to take a scheme from a living prototype, or one that did exist if it no longer exists. I'm going to put that one in last, I think. Now, I'm going to work forward instead of backwards because I think it's easier to slot them in. This has cutouts here to allow for the tubes to run down to the control surfaces. As I've said, I'm not doing that, so I'm just going to leave them in. I'm going to use white glue on the tabs, and I'm going to CA the rest in place because this has got a tendency to try and spring out. Now I could use this jig and push them up, but I think it's far more effective getting everything right by holding it where I want it and using the CA. See the way that's obviously trying to pull out because of the tabs pushing in, but if I get it lined up. Now the first thing I'm going to do is glue along this edge because if I put any pressure on here, it's flexing. It's lightweight wood. I think Tony's or his team or whoever's done this has done a really good job in the wood selection. You don't want heavy lumps of wood like mahogany in a model like this. It'll just make for a poorly flying thing. So I'm going to glue it at the top first. That's taken. And then I'm going to run some CA down the edges, holding it in place. You're probably looking at the back of a hairy hand there at the minute, so apologies. So that's in place. Okay, the next one coming forward, I'm working backwards, and I'm doing that because there's a natural spring in the sides, and this allows me to get the pieces in. You'll notice I've got a clamp on the back. I've lined it up. I'm happy that it's running straight and all is straight. So I've just got to push these in. I know the fit because I have dry fitted them off camera. PVA along the tab. Then I'm going to see it down the edge. So I'll carry on doing this and we'll pop back when it's done. There we go. That's gone together really well. I'm pleased with it. As I say, PVA into the slots, CA to lock everything in place, and then I've put a little fillet of PVA down each one. Something I have noticed as I've been putting this together is that very careful considerations being made regarding the wood. So up to here it's hardwood, and then these are balsa. So considerations being made regarding keeping the weight down at the rear of the fuselage, which anybody that's built models knows can be a real pain if we're not careful. So let's turn my attention now to these parts. Well, the first part's going to be easy because I've got two of those T-nuts and I can press them in. I'll do that now. In a little box, stash of goodies. The last thing you want is these falling all over the place. Wait a minute, if I can get them out. There's one. I checked them multiple times to make sure they hadn't moved from one compartment to another. Sadly, that isn't the case. So I'll take them off. And you've got to remember that these are handed, so you kind of put them, well, actually it doesn't make any difference, I've just realised. So if I pop that in, like that, this is what I'm going to do, is use this engineer's clamp to push them home. Take up some of the slack. Straighten it up. You tighten them at both ends. And then I'm just going to use a screwdriver to tighten that up. So that's that one done. And what I'll do is I'll put one of these in each side and then do my other method that I'll have to do for the remaining one. Just double check everything's fine. I haven't crushed the thread. No. That goes through, that's fine. And I'll do one of the other ones. I've done the fatal thing here of putting it down. Hold the horses, hold your horses, there it is. This is always the fear with small parts, isn't it, that you put them down, can't find them. Same thing, put that in, push it home, and then tighten up using the clamp to drive the teeth into the balsa. Oh well, in this case into the ply or hardwood. That's it. And that takes the tension off. Job's done. Right, next part, I'm going to have to be a little bit canny to make sure that I don't put glue down the thread. So that goes in, that's fine. So what I'm going to do is put one of the nuts on here. And I'm going to use the bolts to hold it in position, put a bit of CA on, and then I'm going to pack some wood, some scrap wood both sides so that the nut can't revolve and it'll become a captive nut. I'll show you when it's done. Here we go. So, well, the first thing I'm going to do is cut the tip of this CA tube so it's nice and fine. I'm just going to put a tiny drop of CA on here to hold it in position. let it go off, and then I'm going to build around that so that the nut itself can't move. That's the theory. Let's see if I can get it to work. It's either that or wait 2-3 weeks for some replacement parts. I'm not prepared to do that. I want to crack on. Right. Well, that's held without gluing the bolt in, which is always a good sign. Now I'm going to make some pieces out of the scraps, the bits of wood that I've taken off, making sure it doesn't bind on the model and get in the way. I'll double check that and I'll pack it off. Let's see if I can get this to work. Well, I hope you can see that. That's done the job. That nut's not going anywhere. Needs must, as they say. And now I'll get it put into here and repeat the same process on the other side. This will actually need a little bit of fettling to set it in, but at least that part's done and I won't have to wait around for any bits to replace the missing parts. That's that problem solved now. Unfortunate little diversion, but it's done. I've also thought when the balsa is sheeted over here, those bolts, or any bolts for that matter, are going to dig into the balsa. So I'm actually going to pack this piece with some corresponding ply so that the bolts aren't digging and the cabane struts aren't going to dig into this covering here. So the next thing to do is to add the stringers along here, and I'll crack on with that now. It's time to add these spruce stringers to the fuselage, and the reason I've put it into the jig is that I'm very aware that unless one's careful, it's possible to induce a twist in the fuselage. So I have the jig, so I'm going to use it, and by doing that I hope to achieve a nice square fuselage and I'm not building any twist into it. So that being the case, I'm going to start with this one first. Hello, Missy. Well, hello there. I'm not going to glue it to this one, remember, because this is getting cut out, but I will glue them in here, and I think I'm going to use a combination of PVA and CA to get this done. So let's get cracking. Okay, Missy. Let's sort the cat out first, shall we? That's the main stringers in. Let's get these little ones put in between the trainee and the pilot. So I'll just mark those off. This adds massively, I'm sure, to the rigidity of the whole structure, which is obviously what we want. It's going to have the glue engine thumping up front, so obviously it needs to have some rigidity, doesn't it? Far less vibration with the electric model, of course. But who wants electric? No, all joking aside, I don't mind but I much prefer a model like this being powered by a 4-stroke. Just sort of cries out for it in my view. That's that bit. Let's move you around. This little bit here to do. Somebody had questioned the strength of this front end, but of course there's another heavier piece to be laminated onto here, another former A0. It's been labelled. That's 2 pieces for this part of the job. And I don't really think this is a sort of application I would prefer to use for PVA glue. It's just too much can move while you're wanting it to set. Yeah, just doing a dry fit there, making sure that it fits in. And it does. So there we have it. Stringer's completed. And I think that'll add greatly to the strength of the model. Next stage, let's add some sheeting. Let's make this part here for the luggage rack. So I need to cut out this one. This is all, I'm a little bit concerned about how this is going to happen, but we'll see. Partly cut through, so with a bit of luck it will come out without doing too much damage. Not convinced, but it will come. Small cuts. I don't like the sound of that. Going off camera here, I'm going to do it. I have to hold it up. Well, that came out about as easily as I thought it would, which wasn't easy at all. And I've managed to break a little piece off the top. I don't really see the point in doing it, to be honest with you. It would have made more sense to me to put this piece in first, but never mind. So that goes in approximately wherever. Let's see if I can get this lined up. Something like that. And then there's the base for the interior. That goes like that. So this obviously comes forward. Right. That would have made more sense to me to just glue that in directly. But never mind. So I'll glue that in and then we'll start cladding it with the decking, the turtle deck, and the part for the between the pilot and the trainee and the cowling area. Right, let's get it glued in. Well folks, I'm going to call that the end of the second video on the building of the fuselage. Got through a couple of little stumbling blocks. It's ready to be clad now, and then other details to be added. So I'm going to leave it there. It's becoming remarkably rigid considering how lightweight the material is, and I am actually very impressed with the selection of the wood. Lighter towards the rear, stronger and heavier towards the front where it's going to be needed. Overall, going well. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, give us a thumbs up if you don't mind. And why not subscribe if you haven't done so yet? Take care, folks.